Assassin's Creed Valhalla is literally The Witcher 3, and I'm fine with that. Let's talk about it. Hey, how's it going, guys? Hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty damn excited for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, even though a lot of people are dogging on the game for basically being more of the same. Now, I did have a lot of issues with Origins and Odyssey, so I do have a bit of negativity going into the game. However, I am an Assassin's Creed fanboy, and the thing about fanboys is that no matter what they do, they're going to love the product no matter what. So after scouring through the internet for all the AC Valhalla goodness that's available, I've come to the conclusion, as have many others, that it is very similar to The Witcher 3. Now, there are negatives and positives to this. The positives being that The Witcher 3 is a pretty good game. A lot of games since The Witcher 3 have taken the approach from CD Projekt Red. They've started implementing features from The Witcher 3 into their games, and this is nothing new. This has happened a lot throughout history. Halo redefined first-person shooters, and after that, FPS games took a lot of inspiration from it, and from Doom as well. Skyrim, The Witcher 3, and so on redefined RPGs. You have Lara Croft redefining third-person shooters, and then you have games like The Last of Us that redefine story games. A lot of these games come out and they inspire and create new styles of games that feel very similar. And this year, it seems as though Cyberpunk 2077 will be the next game to do that. So even though I completely understand and I'm okay with games borrowing from previous games, it gets to the point where it seems too close to home, and I think AC Valhalla is that game. Before, Origins was inspired from The Witcher 3 and we could see it, but it was its own game, as was Odyssey, even though I didn't like either of them. However, Assassin's Creed Valhalla not only has taken inspiration from The Witcher 3 in terms of the RPG progression and mechanics, but also its style. Set in the medieval ages during the Viking invasion is going to be pretty tough to not have it look like The Witcher 3, considering they are both medieval games. However, not only does it look like The Witcher 3 in terms of the setting, but also with a bit of the art style, the lighting, and just general atmosphere. Now, before I really go into this, I do want to say a few things about Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and these are going to be mainly positive because the problems I had with Odyssey and Origins seem to be fixed here. I don't mind Assassin's Creed going the RPG route. There are issues, sure, I'm sure many of you understand them and you express them vividly, as I see in a lot of comments. However, I like it. I like RPGs, and I think Assassin's Creed taking the RPG route is not a problem in of itself. I think the problem comes when you stray too far away from what made Assassin's Creed what it was, and then make this game into an RPG that has no resemblance to the original games at all, other than name value and a few bits of the lore. Social stealth has returned. Eivor can put his hood up or down, and then it depends on which environment you're in. It will actually affect whether the NPCs will attack you or detect you, and I think that's really cool. Things like the one-shot hidden blade have returned, and there is a unique approach to one-shot and bosses and bigger enemies where you can time the assassination. If you get it correctly, then you do hit the one-hit assassination, or at the very least take a very large portion of health. But if you miss it, then you do take a smaller portion of health, but you'd have to fight the enemy head-on. However, most of the people you fight will be one-shot assassinations. And that was one of the biggest complaints that I had from Origins and Odyssey. Not being able to one-shot assassinate a lot of enemies meant that I was no longer an assassin and forced me to play confrontational with my swords, whereas a lot of the time I prefer to play stealthy, climbing on buildings and jumping down to assassinate enemy from enemy. It's just the way that I prefer to play my games. The combat itself looks kind of cool, although it was quite janky, but Ubisoft did come out and said that they're working on more animations and making it smoother because it's not completely fixed. Will this work in the end? We don't know. This could just be some talk, but I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt, considering that Ubisoft, they do pretty well when it comes to their animations. The character faces look kind of weird. I mean, Eivor looked fine, but he is the main protagonist, or she is the main protagonist, so they do tend to put way more detail on the main cast than the side characters. So for the main cast, they looked great, but the side characters, from what we could see, yeah, not too impressive at all. The lip syncing was a bit off, but again, these are things that may or may not change as the game launches. The raid battles look quite unique and fun. This is one thing that I really wanted improved over Odyssey. The conquest battles was a great feature that felt good 2 times, and after that it got really boring and repetitive. I don't want to see the raid battles get repetitive. I want to go into each one and have it be different, tackle it in a different way, have different bosses and enemies and such like that. They are trying to keep the game feeling fresh with having more variations of enemies, so that is a good thing. You can travel around through longboats, you can pet cats and actually hug them, and dogs as well, so that's I don't know why people really love this in games, and I do too. I don't know why, but it's in the game, and that's gonna automatically make it an 11 out of 10, I guess. But look, as much as I think this game is going to be good and is going to fix a lot of the issues, or just a few of the issues that I had with Odyssey, considering that my main ones were mostly of the stealthy aspect of it, this game just doesn't look like Assassin's Creed, and that could be said for a couple of the past titles, but this one in particular really screams The Witcher clone, and that may be a bit harsh, and I understand that this is something that we are going to have to play and see for ourselves, but, and this is a big but, as it is right now, the people that have played the game are saying pretty much the same thing. It is a Witcher clone, but with parkour and a bit of stealth. And you know what? I'm completely fine with that. I think The Witcher 3 is a great game for what it offers, and I think Assassin's Creed games are great for what they try to offer. Mixing them together may create a recipe for absolute disaster, but it could also make something a bit special if familiar, because the one thing that I felt The Witcher 3 lacked amongst all else was its verticality and exploration options. Sure, there were lots of different ways to explore the world, not taking anything away from it, of course, diving underwater, running, on horseback, on boat, blah blah blah. There's a lot of ways to explore, but Assassin's Creed is obviously the better game when it comes to exploration, because it has all of the things that The Witcher 3 has, plus parkour, which is a very big thing when you want to explore. You see a building, you want to climb it. You see a mountain, you want to get over it, etc. It's just the way people want to play the games, and it's great to have it in there. So though I highly doubt Assassin's Creed Valhalla is going to be better than The Witcher 3 in terms of its RPG mechanics and story, and even graphics, which is weird to say considering that The Witcher 3 is 5 years old and looks better than this game, which is in 2020 and coming out on the Xbox Series X and the PS5, the main thing I hope that they take away from The Witcher 3 wouldn't even be the main story, the graphics, or even some of the RPG mechanics. It would actually be the side missions. I think the one thing that The Witcher 3 did better than anything else in its entirety of the game was its side content. There has been no game since or before The Witcher 3 that has done side quests and missions better than it. Pure and simple. Red Dead Redemption 2 had some great side missions that were featured throughout the main story as well. Great job. But look, nowhere near The Witcher 3, and that's coming from someone who believes that RDR2 is the greatest game of all time. If Assassin's Creed is going to take one thing, and one thing only, from The Witcher 3, I would love it if they incorporated its side content. However, if Ubisoft is going to continue making the future Assassin's Creed games into RPGs, then there is no better game to take inspiration from than The Witcher 3. However, there's a problem. Just because you try to mimic something's success into your own title doesn't mean it's going to work. It's not going to automatically make your game just as good or better than the other game, because simply put, mimicry isn't innovation. It is not something you own, and you can never mimic something better than the original creator. That is why a game like Genshin Impact isn't going to be better than Zelda Breath of the Wild. That is why when Sony tried to create Killzone to destroy Halo, it didn't work. I hope that more than anything, even if Assassin's Creed Valhalla is heavily inspired by The Witcher 3, it tries to do its own thing more than anything else.